We know you're busy and that you can't always find the time to tune in live to the Daily Breakfast Show. So we've handpicked the very best of this past week's news, and together with our show sponsors MB Crusher, we're delighted to bring you the Weekend Wrap. In this week's episode, why the word compliant might not mean what you think it means. We're looking ahead to Bauma 2022. And why is the life of a roofer worth 27 times that of a demolition worker? All that and more on the Weekend Wrap. If you were here for the Saturday Social Show, you'll have to forgive me as I'm about to revisit one of the subjects we touched upon at the weekend. However, this time around, it will not be a stream of consciousness word salad. This time I've actually done a bit more thinking, a bit more digging, and actually reached a few conclusions. But before all of that, allow me to set the scene. The website of the National Federation of Demolition Contractors serves a multitude of purposes. It is a hub for NFDC members. It's a news portal, although the news included is only about those within the Federation. It details who the senior officers are and what medallions they get to wear. And of course, it allows members to point proudly to their listing and say, look, I'm officially now playing with the big boys. But the website serves another purpose. And that purpose is as a shop window through which to showcase those companies considered worthy of membership. So if you're a main contractor, a local authority, or even a private individual that needs a spot of demolition doing, you can search by region and find a demolition contractor that will be able to help. Now, being listed on the NFDC website does, I'm sure, offer potential clients a certain peace of mind. After all, the NFDC is an organisation with a proud tradition, and it likes to remind us that its members are the very best of the very best. And besides, each member listing shows in clear black and white who among the elite are currently considered compliant. So when you choose a contractor, you're getting the very best of the very best with a compliance cherry on top, right? Not necessarily. I did a quick check on Saturday morning and found that 7 of the current NFDC members that have admitted involvement in the bid rigging scandal that is currently being picked over by the CMA are still shown as compliant. The 2 companies named by the CMA that have not yet admitted involvement, Erith Group and Scrip Group, are also shown as compliant. Now, while you're mulling over the fact that you can be compliant while being named in a collusion probe, here's another point. Erith Group said last week that it is being investigated over a site fatality. That hasn't impacted upon its NFDC compliance status either. And Brown and Mason Group was actually fined in the past few weeks over a site death of its own. They too are still shown as compliant. And yet several companies are shown as non-compliant because they didn't submit the site for auditing within the allotted time frame. Now, there is an important distinction to draw here. Compliance in NFDC circles means that a company has successfully passed an NFDC site audit. It doesn't mean that member companies are saintly, angelic, or that they have not been involved in serious or even fatal accidents. And the problem is, the website doesn't make that distinction. It merely says whether a company is compliant or not. And to the client that only deals with demolition occasionally, that is surely open to misunderstanding. At best, it's misleading, but at worst, it could be seen, surely, as misrepresentative of the facts. And there's a bit more to all of this. Keltbray, another of the companies to admit involvement in the bid rigging scandal, is, like all the others, shown as compliant on the NFDC website, and yet it is shown as uncertified under the Safety Schemes in Procurement, or SSIP scheme. Keltbray Built Environment was recently named on the £1.1 billion Pagabo Demolition and Land Remediation Framework. Now, whether or not the built environment distinction is important, I have no idea. At the same time, I hope you're following this, at the same time, John F. Hunt Regeneration also won a place on the Pagabo framework. Yet it is currently shown as non-compliant on the NFDC website because it has not yet completed a site audit. It is also shown as uncertified under the SSIP scheme too. So when the NFDC boasted proudly that only NFDC members have been selected to the Pagabo framework, it was once again being just a touch disingenuous, as one of those companies had a foot through the Federation door, but had not yet satisfied its own standards for membership. So, to avoid confusion, you can be compliant on the NFDC website even if you have admitted involvement in a bid rigging scandal. You can be compliant on the NFDC website even if you have been involved in a fatal site accident. But if you fail to submit a site for auditing in a timely fashion, or if your paperwork is a bit to cock, you are non-compliant. Now, I wonder how many client companies are aware of that distinction. I honestly thought I'd covered all the bases, that I'd looked at the CMA investigation from every conceivable angle. I'd considered the impact upon the companies named in the probe into bid rigging within the UK demolition sector. I spoke about the possible impact upon the employees of those companies. I talked at length about the likely reaction from clients, particularly any that find they paid over the odds for some past demolition work that was rigged from the get-go. I questioned why demolition trade bodies were failing in their duty to uphold industry standards by their apparent refusal to expel any companies that brought their respective organisations into disrepute. And I also raised the question of how the CMA investigation might impact upon the industry's already tarnished reputation with the general public. But I missed an angle. Even though it was there staring me right in the face, I failed to spot another potential area of fallout from the CMA debacle. However, I received an email last night that showed me the light. In fact, it actually showed me more dark. I won't reveal the name of the person that sent me the email because I don't want to cause them any issues down the line. But here is what the email said. Firstly, I would like to say I'm a great fan of your shows, especially the interesting developments of the CMA investigation. I like the no holding back approach. But my question to you is this. I have recently achieved my Black Demolition Manager CCDO card, and I'm planning to join the IDE and apply to do my foundation degree in demolition management to push forward my career. I want to move to a Tier 1 contract, so I get the opportunity to learn from the very best in the industry. But with the CMA investigation going on, would it be wise to apply to the companies involved, or should I look at a Tier 2 contractor pushing for Tier 1 status? I would really appreciate your opinion on this, as I love being placed at the deep end, as it's the only way to test yourself. But I wouldn't want to damage my reputation and hard work by moving to a contractor that will have their name dragged through the mud, and possibly my name too. Now, before we get into the meat of all this, I will say here what I said in my response to the individual that sent the email. It's very clear that you are taking your demolition career seriously. A Tier 1 or a Tier 2 contractor will be lucky to have a person with your drive and foresight on their team. But now we're done with the niceties, what does that say about the state of the industry? We have a person here that has already undergone a great deal of training and gained a great deal of experience in order to secure their black card. They are precisely the kind of dynamic and committed person the industry is crying out for. They should be, and they are, precisely the kind of person that demolition companies are falling over themselves to attract. And yet they are now forced to make career choices based, at least in part, upon which employers to avoid. As ever, I can turn to a footballing analogy that sums up this situation perfectly. A decade or so ago, Manchester United were the biggest team, not just in the UK, but in the world. They were winning everything, and as a result, they were a magnet attracting some of the very best players in the world. But with the departure of long-term manager Sir Alex Ferguson, things took a turn for the worse. The team began to slide down the league table. They stopped winning trophies, and suddenly the world's best and most ambitious players were not attracted to Old Trafford, but to nearby Manchester City and Liverpool. Unable to attract the top-class talent upon which they previously relied, Manchester United started to slide even further down the league table. They were no longer the threat they once were. As a West Ham fan, I used to dread the 2 games against the Red Devils each year. Now I see those fixtures as a potential 6 points. So coming back to all things demolition, there are some big name contractors that could now find themselves cast as the Manchester United of the industry. They may now find it harder to win and to win big. Their ability to attract and retain the best people will therefore be impacted and impaired. And without the constant supply of dynamic new talent, they too could find themselves sliding down the league table. All of which informed my response to the person that sent me the email. I pointed out there were some very good teams out there doing some truly great work, that those teams were already competing with the top teams in the country, and that they now have an opportunity to win, and to win big themselves. That those teams have a stable management that's not likely to change anytime soon. And I meant every word. But I can't help thinking that in the midst of a major skill shortage that is worsening by the day, the industry may have just shot itself in the foot. Or more accurately, it's been shot in the foot by a handful of big name contractors. I'm also left with this thought. With the Manchester United level teams of the demolition world unable to attract the talent that was once drawn to it like a moth to a flame, those Tier 2 companies, the West Hams and the Arsenals of the demolition business, now have the opportunity to grab some of that talent for themselves. Those companies are already competing for industry silverware, but with the addition of some new talent, there may be no stopping them. As a final point, I'll leave you with this thought. There was a time when Manchester United fans referred to Manchester City as their noisy neighbours. Those same fans now have to watch from afar as those noisy neighbours go from strength to strength, while their own team seems to move from one crisis to another. In the world of demolition, there are plenty of noisy neighbours just waiting for their chance to shine. The life of a roofer is worth 27 times more than that of a demolition worker. That is surely the implication of a pair of recent fatal accident prosecutions. In the case of a roofer, the fine levied against the company involved was £135,000. In the case of the demolition worker, the fine was just £5,000. I realise that such fines are linked to turnover and that there may have been extenuating circumstances, but the optics clearly suggest that the life of a roofer is worth way more than that of a demolition worker. Now, we've previously discussed the paltry fine levied against Brown and Mason over the death of a demolition worker at Long Gennet Power Station. But just to recap, Brown and Mason was hit with a £5,000 fine just a few weeks ago after an employee, Gary Robertson, fell to his death when a rusty pipe bridge platform collapsed. A joint investigation by the Health and Safety Executive and the police in Scotland found that the section of metal grating on the pipe bridge on which the deceased had been standing gave way under his weight because it was so corroded. By failing to record the hazardous condition of the pipe bridge, the company had failed to undertake a suitable and sufficient risk assessment. In particular, the risk assessment, which formed part of the final revised method statement, did not address the severely corroded nature of the pipe bridge, despite it being previously highlighted and requested by the client, Scottish Power. Now, there were various machinations at Brown and Mason in the immediate aftermath of the accident, including a company name change, but the upshot was that the company received a fine of just £5,000 for the avoidable death of a worker. Now, compare and contrast that with the £135,000 fine handed down to a pair of companies in Northern Ireland over the equally avoidable death of a roofer. 43-year-old Raymond Morgan fell 5 metres through the roof of a disused factory back on the 28th of May 2014. He died from his injuries the following day. Demolition, site clearance and removal of asbestos materials was contracted to Leslie Wright and to H. Miskimmin Limited. The investigation found that Morgan and several other workers on the roof stripping asbestos sheeting, which, when removed, was lowered to the ground using a scissor lift. At approximately 12:15 p.m, Morgan fell through the fragile asbestos roof onto a concrete floor below. Preventative measures were not in place to prevent any worker from either falling from or through the roof structure. Both companies were sentenced at Belfast Crown Court on the 7th of July after pleading guilty to breaches of health and safety legislation. Demolition contractor Leslie Wright was fined a total of £90,000. Wright also received a 9-month custodial sentence, suspended for 2 years, and he was disqualified as a director for 10 years. Construction company H. Miskimin Limited was fined £45,000. Now, the fact that it took more than 8 years for this prosecution to be brought and concluded is perhaps a story for another day. But how can a legal system be so skewed and so inconsistent that a site fatality is considered to be worth £135,000 in one instance and a meagre £5,000 in another? All the latest news, views, video and comment from the demolition and construction industry, live and interactive each weekday morning at 10 a.m. GMT. Tune in, take part on The Breakfast Show, live. It seems that we have only just shaken the hillhead dust from our boots, but we're already looking forward to the next big date on the industry calendar, Bauma. 103 days from now, the world's largest exhibition will open its doors once again. We will be there to bring you all the fun of the massive trade fair, and we hope to see some of you there too. But just to get you in the mood, take a look at this. One other quick comment. I think this is Gary Major over on LinkedIn, although I can't tell. Hi, Mark. Wow, interesting to see the old Coventry Uni building finally demolished. It was sagging even when I was at the art design faculty in the background between 81 and 85. You don't look old enough. But yes, I'm another top job by Armac. I think Mr. Banty may have got his sights wrong, but love the black magic bit. If anyone can clarify what all that is about, I'd love to hear from you. All right, let's get back on the show. If you were here yesterday, you will recall that we brought you a very poignant film about a mining shovel that had reached the end of its working life. Well, to provide a bit of balance, today we're bringing you a film of a mining shovel that is just starting its working life. There is one thing that excites us even more than remote control machines. It is the demolition of massive chimneys. But imagine if you could combine the two. Bye.